Welcome to another episode of the More Than a Game podcast. And joining me on the podcast today is former Illawarra Hawks player and coach, Xavier Cooks. Eric spent a number of seasons playing in the NBL before transitioning into a coaching role with the Illawarra Hawks. And he was actually a member of the staff when they won their first ever championship back in 2001. And we look forward to touching base about that today. He's had an incredible career, and his son plays a ride of the game of basketball as well. Just quietly, Xavier Cooks is lining it up in the NBA with the Washington Wizards after winning a championship with the Sydney Kings going back to back, and we look forward to touching base about his progression today on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have Eric with us. Eric Cooks, welcome to the More Than a Game podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Dan. It's a pleasure to be on.
Thanks for coming on, mate. We look forward to diving into your story and your career very shortly. But before we do that, son Xavier, who's lining it up, as I said, in the NBA, doing some great things over there with the Washington Wizards before winning the championship with the Sydney Kings. No doubt proud of his achievements over the last little while.
Needless to say, very proud. Obviously, he's only hopefully starting up in the NBA. He had 10 games this season after playing with the Kings, after winning the championship. I thought he did pretty well for those 10 games, and I think the coaches and staff there was pretty happy with what he did, because pretty much what they brought him there for is to be that type of player.
Absolutely. No, he's started really well, and I guess we're talking to you just previously about how he wasn't fielding any calls from agents or anything like that. He was fully committed to the Kings and winning back-to-back, so I hear there were a few calls coming through during the season, but eventually landed with the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they had that period where quite a few U.S. scouts was in town, and obviously he was feeling that as well. And I think that's during the time that he also rolled an ankle, so he was thought that was a bad time for that. And I think that's when he eventually did get the news that he pretty much had a guaranteed contract.
Yeah, no doubt an incredible experience for him, hearing those words, guaranteed contract in the NBA. It doesn't come around all that often, but he's worked hard and deserves it. But I guess going back to his time in the NBL, he's already had an incredible career and winning back-to-back championships. So it was a bit touch and go there, I guess, number of injuries early on in his career in the NBL. Obviously spent some time in Europe as well, but I'm no doubt proud of his resilience and his determination to get back to full health. And I remember him sitting on the sidelines and what biding his time, but he's come back in an incredible way, hasn't he?
Yes, I mean, he had a pretty much injury-free time in Europe. It was only 1 year in Germany, and then he came back here and had a history of injuries at the time. But once he made the World Cup team, basically 4 years ago, that's when he got his first injury. I think he might have ran into Andrew Bogut at the workout prior to the game against the U.S. at that.
Yeah.
So that took him out for a while, and then obviously came back late in that year. Only played a few games. They did make it to the grand final that year. That was the year, unfortunately, we didn't have our actual completion to the year. Obviously, Perth, I think, did deserve it on those circumstances. But so that was 3 grand finals in 4 years during his time here. So that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good, if you don't say so yourself. Well, just quickly about I guess his time in the NBA. He's only been there for a short while, but how has he been fitting in? What has he said about the team and the environment? Obviously, hopefully enjoying it.
Obviously, he loves it. He thinks it's a very talented team. He'd say it's obviously a different level of athleticism involved with some of the players. He'd say one of his players at training when he first got there was jumping out of the gym. He said, "Oh, I'm pretty worried if everyone's like that." But it's only a few of those super athletes, but every team got a few. So, that's something you got to be prepared for. But no, he enjoyed the guys. He said the guys was very welcoming to him. Take him out for dinner, really made him feel at home, and the coaching staff have been really good. Unfortunately, the GM is no longer there. He seemed to be a big fan as well, so I was a bit disappointed that happened, but obviously that's the line of work we're in, or they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. He's done well. And just in your opinion, as we finish up on Xavier, just his progression, I guess, obviously starting to build before the season ended, but in your opinion, what do you think he needs to do to take his game to the next level over there in terms of, I guess, moving away from that role player, maybe starting and really contributing down the track?
I mean, obviously that's a little bit down down the line a bit. Obviously, just need to fit in and do what they brought him there for. And I think that's what I mean. Different people have different roles within a team. I think they have enough guys that look to be aggressive and to score, so they need more of a team type player that's looking to help other people get involved. And I think they do a lot of those things naturally. I mean, obviously they really impressed by the offensive boarding. That's a key for what they brought him there for. But his, I guess, point forward, his mentality of, team first is what they're really impressed. So I think those are things he need to drive home, obviously, to get in. Now, as far as to make the next step to being, I guess, beyond a limited role player would be to knock down the three. I think that's every player in the NBA pretty much need a 3-point shot nowadays. And obviously that's something you need to work on. Needless to say, the free throws would help as well.
They all help, don't they? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, he's doing great things. And I know all the Sydney Kings fans are cheering him on, and most NBL fans too, I guess. So we look forward to seeing how he progresses. But let's go to your career, because you did have a career yourself. And
yes, a long time ago.
Yeah. But you hailed from Indiana and grew up loving the sport, obviously, and playing. But how did you get involved in the sport of basketball? How did you come to play in the first place?
Well, I mean, my hometown is Gary, Indiana. So it was basketball mad. I mean, around that time, you might have seen the movie Hoosiers. That's sort of how we grew up, where basketball was like. We had, 5,000 people at some of our holiday tournaments in town. So it was really a big thing. And obviously, we felt that if you played well in our city, you had a good chance of getting a scholarship. So we was very competitive as a high school. I had some guys that went all the way to the NBA as well on my high school team. Wallace Bryant, a 7-footer we had in high school, played for Golden State at one time, a couple of years there. A couple of other guys went very well as well. But like I say, very competitive. We had quite a few guys. My high school coach also coached Glenn Robinson, the big dog. He's from my hometown. Someone I played against, son, is playing now. Can't think of his name at the moment, but yeah, we was basketball mad. So I competed there, got a scholarship to go to St. Mary's, which was before all Australians started going there. Actually, I did play there with Brian Shaw a couple of years prior to him transferring to UC Santa Barbara. We was right around the mark. Back then they only took one team from the conference to the tournament, and each year we finished second, runner up. So that was very disappointing. We didn't actually make it to the tournament, but. We was very competitive every year we was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of ended up getting me here. Actually, my time at St. Mary's, I played against Loyola Marymount, which at the time was coached by Ed Gorgon.
All right.
Which is, in a long about way is how I end up getting here after playing against him. And when Brian got his first coaching job, of course, he rang his dad and asked for suggestions, and I was one of the names on that list. And Brian showed up in San Francisco and talked me into coming here, basically.
Well, yeah. There you go. I was going to ask you that because I didn't actually know the story of how you got out here. But, wow, that's really cool. So there's a connection, again, with Brian Gorgon. Seems every guest I have on, he has a connection or was coached by him. But
yeah, because after coming out, I stayed with him that first year as well. So I got to, and that was his first year coaching. So we both was learning on the fly.
Yeah, absolutely. But, obviously some areas touching on that. Obviously, Malfi Dellavedova, Paddy Mills, Kate Gaze, some great Aussie players still playing, went through that system, obviously. What was it like back then, though?
Well, it's a lot more. I think even some of the young ones, I can't think of his name, coached at the AIS. He was one of the first ones.
Robbie McKinley.
No. Can't think. From Perth originally.
Adam Caporn?
Caporn.
Here we go.
He was one of the early ones too. Dave Patrick, I think, went through there as well. But yeah, with long ties. And Randy Bennett which is the coach at St. Mary's. He was in another team in the conference when I was at St. Mary's. So I met him some of his first years coming out of here. Ironically, he always had scrimmages against the Hawks. So I got to know Randy pretty well. And obviously he made a lot of trips back out here after that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you spent about 10 years, was it, with Ballarat Miners in the SEABL competition? And
11, I think. Yep, thereabout. Yeah.
And coached by Brendan Joyce as well. Is that where it all started, the relationship with Brendan Joyce down there?
Yes. I mean, like I say, Brian was we had very good coaches at Ballarat, by the way, and they still do. But my first coach was Brian. That's who brought me out. And then that followed up by a close friend of his and a close friend of mine, Al Westover, that later coached the Tigers to a couple of championships. He's actually my daughter's godfather. All right. But he's close. And then we had Brendan Joyce as well. So we had 3 coaches that did very well in the NBL coaching.
Yeah. Incredible. And so Brendan was the one, I believe, that brought you to the Hawks back then, Illawarra, then changed to Wollongong. But you played with the likes of, from memory, Glenn Saville, Matt Campbell early in their careers.
Yes.
CJ Bruton was there, Dave Anderson, some incredible Australian players early on in their careers. When you were playing with them, did you feel like, or think at the time, that these guys have a big future ahead of them?
Oh, definitely. That was something I told Glenn early. I mean, Matt Campbell, I've been playing with him since he was 16. He was at Ballarat with me as well prior to coming here. Yep. So I had a long relationship with Matt. Glenn always was a super athlete, and you could tell that he had a long future ahead. Some of the others, David Anderson, he was only, we call him Puppy back then. He was only 17. He only played the 1 year here prior to going overseas, and I was actually his roommate a lot during that year. Obviously, he was a talent. He was a very smart player as well. And I think that's what got him so far in the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, some great players there. Obviously, Glenn Saville and Matt Campbell's jersey's retired up in with the banners there. So that's really exciting that you got a chance to play with them early on. But after 4 seasons playing in the NBL, you've moved into coaching, and obviously has spent a number of years as assistant coach, spent a year coaching as well as a head coach. Was that something you always wanted to do, or was it something that just came about? And you also coached with, as I said, Brendan Joyce, Gordy McLeod, Rob Beveridge. What was it like being tutored by them or mentored by them?
Yeah, I mean, great times. I mean, great individuals. Different coaches brought different things. I mean, even being involved with Brian and those guys as well. So I think a lot of the coaches I've been involved with have done extremely well, and I learned something from each one of them. Each one of them carried themselves in a different manner and had different traits and different accents, but all of them was great individual coaches. But I learned a lot from all of them. Yes.
Was it something you always wanted to do, to get into coaching?
I wouldn't say it was something I always wanted to do, but I always loved the sport, and I was more than happy to be involved, to continue. And then through circumstances, I became the head coach, and I think it was 2.5, 3 years. Obviously, we had some financial issues in that time and didn't have the squad that I thought we needed. And I obviously was learning on the job as well, but it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Absolutely, no doubt. I'll come back to the head coaching opportunity in just a moment, but you were a part of the coaching setup, I believe, when the Hawks won the first championship. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Back 2000, 2001. Yeah. Obviously, outstanding year. I mean, I guess we were probably underdogs the whole way. I mean, it was a team that I think we called ourselves road dogs at the time. We was very good on the road, so we had no problem having to go. Most of the series we had to win 2 on the road, or all 3 series I think went 3 games. But I mean, that was a trait of the team, and we was very deep. Everybody contributed on that squad. I mean, obviously Melvin Thomas, another one whose jersey's hanging from the rafters, was on that squad as well. And Charles Thomas, Damon Laurie, obviously I played with him in Ballarat. We won multiple championships there as well. Me and Damon together with Eric Hayes. But yeah, no, it was like family. No, it was a real good year.
Absolutely.
Brendan did a great job coaching. The other assistant coach unfortunately passed away, Eric Lowe, but he was a long-time Hawk supporter also with the Hawks. Ironically, my first year in Australia, he was on the team with me.
Right.
Brian was coaching us, and me and Eric Lowe played together
Wow.
back in the early days.
Yeah.
And obviously, I was there with him all 10 years and here with him for 10 or so years as well. So I had a long relationship.
Yeah, so many connections there. It's so good to hear. But going back to that championship, I guess that not infamous, but that famous shot of Damon Lowry just bouncing around on the ring. I think it was a shot to get into the final from memory. But what were your thoughts as that?
Well, it was. I think we was down 2, and the ball basically on our baseline, so we had to go the length of the court. We barely got over half court. Damon had a prayer of a shot, and a good friend of mine, Darnell would swear today that he didn't foul him, but the refs didn't see it that way. Damon believed he was almost murdered on the foul, but I think it was different views on that. But thanks to us, he went up and knocked down all 3. Obviously, all 3 was a bit shaky, but never in doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. It was incredible. I remember that moment, still watching it on TV as a kid. But you mentioned Darnell Mee there. It's funny you mentioned him because I was actually thinking about him the other day. I had I've been giving my son my old basketball cards, and I had an NBA card of Darnell Mee when he was playing for Denver Nuggets. And it just got me thinking, for me, he's probably one of the most underrated. Well, he was obviously an incredible player, but in terms of his contribution to the sport over here, I mean, I think of guys as a guard who I wouldn't want to guard. He would be one of them. Like, he's athletic, he would shoot,
well,
he's strong.
You probably wouldn't want him to guard you either.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
he was outstanding on defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I became very good friends with Darnell. I saw a lot of the tapes when he was in college, and he was a beast on defense. He was just so long and so quick. Great player, great mind. He really thought the game. When he came to us at Wollongong, he wasn't probably as quick or athletic as he had been before, but that he started a career shooting threes. I think his first game with us, he might have hit 10 threes. But no, outstanding player. And like I say, he really thought the game. He really wanted to get everyone involved. He was one of the first ones that I thought really pushed the ball without dribbling it. He was one of the had great up-court vision. But I still talk to Darnell. Great guy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I still remember his shot. It's a very awkward-looking shot, but it was effective at the end of the day.
But very athletic. He had a few dunks that probably go down in history as well over some centers.
Yeah. As I said, I think there's a lot of great imports that have played in the league, but he's right up there in my opinion. Just what he brought to the NBL, great player. But moving into your time, also being a head coach, you spent time, I think it was a season or 2 that you were a head coach. And what were your memories of that season and the opportunity?
2.5 seasons. I took over, I think, halfway through one season because of some situations with the club. But I mean, it was a learning experience for sure. I thought, especially my second season, I thought we had a team that really should have competed for at least a playoff spot. We, I think, might have went a bit over 500. It was a very competitive year that year. There's a lot of teams that was very deep. But I thought we had some names that, because we had temporarily lost Sav. He went down and played with Brian Gorgon in Sydney. So when he came back, we had a team that I thought should have been probably a little bit better than they were.
Yeah.
And we were.
I guess some legends playing with you, but I guess my question around that, you talked about the learning. I think any sort of leadership position or coaching position, you do learn a lot about yourself in the role. And I've been reflecting on this lately in my role, but also talking to someone just today about it, how important it is to be self-aware as a coach, as a leader, being aware of your strengths, but also, I don't like to say weaknesses, but your growth areas. It's so important in terms of, the way you portray or come across to your players or your staff, that sort of things. How important is it in a leadership capacity, coaching capacity, to be self-aware, and how do you grow in your understanding to, I guess, further yourself, but also the team?
Yes, and it's important the people you have around you as well. That
Of course.
obviously can help you with some of those areas as well.
Absolutely. But how would you say how's it helpful? What things, strategies can you put in place to grow in your ability to be self-aware? And obviously you mentioned one about having people around you, listening to them, I guess, and their advice.
I mean, obviously, you get a lot of that, and plus, the owners at that time was very hands-on. So, I mean, obviously, I took advice and information from them, and the players. I had some fairly, strong-minded players that was been around for a while that sort of helped through situations as well. I mean, like I say, we was probably. I don't remember the exact record, but I think it was only 3 or 4 games out of missing off on the playoff year when I thought we did have the talent to do it. But at the end of the day, it's a sport that you really got to win, basically. And obviously, I think at the end of that anyway, I think we went into receivership at the time prior to one of the occasions, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to touch on that because, I guess since probably maybe mid 2015, 16, like the club's really struggled apart from those 2 seasons that Brian took over Gorgian. What is, in your opinion, that needs to be put in place? What model to sort of maybe recapture the minds and the hearts of the region down there? Because you look at the crowds across the league, they're all growing and thriving, but the Hawks still seem to be stuck where they were maybe 10 years ago. So what is it, do you think, that needs to take place to grow the sport down there?
It's I mean, we didn't had some pretty good years, and obviously when a team is successful on the court, we have obviously better crowds. Sure. I mean, whether we're traditionally a basketball town, it's probably fair to say we're not. We're probably more in our NRL here, or even soccer, the Wolves, but like I say, most teams or cities like a winner. And in the years that we were successful in the playoff race, we was getting good crowds. It's being consistent about that. And, that comes down to budget, a lot of situations where, I mean, the last couple of years, obviously they spent more, and I think they were more competitive, not to mention Brian with his expertise and the people he brought in. But I think, this year, I think they looked, as far as the recruiting, I think they looked like they got a team that could compete for a playoff spot. And once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. I think they got some talent. For whatever reason, they had injuries obviously hurts everyone, but I thought last year was unfortunate, really bad year for injuries for them.
Yeah,
I think they lost all 4 imports at one time or another throughout the year. So sorry.
Yeah, massively tough season for them, but hopefully Hawks fans get on board and they can move forward. But I guess one of the teams I wanted to talk to you about, I think you were coaching still at the time, that I feel like it was a missed opportunity to really build from here, because I remember back to I think it was around 2015, 16, the squad that the Hawks assembled that year, for me, is up there with, like, there's been some incredible squads that the Hawks put together. But for me, Kevin Lish, Kirk Penny, Oscar Foreman captain the team, AJ Ogilvy, probably one of his best seasons, made the All-NBL squad. That was a incredible team.
That team made it to the grand final off memory. That was Rob Beveridge, I think, was the coach of that team. Again, we ran into Bryce Cotton, I believe, if my memory serves me right. And I think probably wasn't for Bryce, we probably would have had another championship that year. Very competitive team. You're right. It's Kirk Penny was, I think his first year back in the NBL after being overseas, and he was outstanding that year. Like you say, Kevin Lish was really going well. That was AJ's. I think he was a 20-point scorer back then as well on that squad.
Yeah.
So and we still had Glenn Seville and Matt Campbell, I think, in that squad. So. Yeah, we definitely had a good team. We unfortunately just fell that one hurdle short.
Yeah, absolutely. And some lean years after that. But, hopefully, as I said, next season's a positive one for the Hawks. But another player I want to touch on that you probably had the opportunity we did have the opportunity to coach, Rodney Clark. I wanted to mention his name because I had a chance to meet him a few times. Great guy. an incredible player. The guy could shoot. Like, I've seen some shooters in the NBL. He was up there with the best shooters in the NBL I've ever seen. What was it like coaching him? And
I mean, he's a super nice guy. I mean, he's very polite, very genuine. But when he get on the court, he was a beast on the court. He was definitely a scorer. I think he changed the way we ran our offense basically during that year. I think it might have been Gordy McLeod would have been the coach when we had Rodney, the head coach. And we went through a real lean part to probably the first third of the year. And we brought in some different offensive moves to, I guess, let Rodney be freer. And it changed our whole year. I think we may have we definitely went to the finals one of those years with Rodney. I think he ended up winning the MVP. He definitely won it. He won it over Perth's guy, James Ennis, which was, I think James Ennis wasn't too impressed by that. He might have lost his trophy that year in Yarra, I believe. But Rodney was a great player, and I thought he deserved that championship. I mean, that MVP trophy. But he's an outstanding player, outstanding person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's been some incredible players that have gone through the Hawks system, and you've been one of those and been around for so long. No doubt. Well, we have seen you at Kings games recently, but I'm sure you'll be cheering them on this next season and hoping them, wishing them all the best.
For sure.
Just as we finish up, I guess the question I was keen to ask you is, having been a player, coaching, do you see yourself moving forward, getting involved in a coaching capacity once again at all, or is that it?
Not in a rush. I'm enjoying the time away from it. I'm enjoying being a fan. I really do enjoy just going and watching the game and being impressed by both teams in a lot of situations, individual players. Obviously, when my son was there, I probably was a little bit more biased towards Sydney. But I mean, Sydney and Wollongong will still be my two favorite teams, obviously, in the NBL.
Yeah. Well, it's a good note to finish on, mate. I really appreciate your time and giving us an insight into your career and life. But Eric Cooks, thanks for joining us on the More Than a Game.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you. Thanks for having me.